Then the Sports Central, we go over our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the BYU Cougars, the team that went 8-5 overall in the 2022 season. Another successful season for BYU. This team has been excellent the past few years. The past 3 seasons, they've had 8+ wins, and this team is joining the Power 5 in 2023. This team is in the Big 12 this season. First time this team has been in a conference since 2010, so it's been a while for BYU. But how is this team going to be in 2023, and what can we expect out of the Cougars in the 2023 season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. And overall, a solid season for this team. Started the season 4-1 with a win over South Florida in week 1, went on the road, beat them 50-21, beat Baylor in week 2 in double overtime, 26-20. That was a huge win there. Both teams were looking really good heading into that matchup, and Baylor especially. Coming off of their excellent 2021 season, they still had some pretty high expectations, so that was a huge win there. And then went to Eugene, where took the first loss of the season there, lost to them 41-20, but came back and had 2 nice wins over Wyoming and then Utah State. So this team was 4-1 heading into the Notre Dame matchup, which was in Las Vegas, and that was definitely a close matchup that was between 2 of your top independent teams in the country there. Notre Dame, obviously, who is staying independent, but BYU now heading to the Big 12. But a good matchup. BYU ended up losing it 28-20, but a close fought game. Then this was where the main losing streak of the season was. You lost to Arkansas the next week, then lost to Liberty 41-14. Not sure what happened in that matchup. That one was just a messy one. And then lost to East Carolina by 3. So, a couple of tough losses there in October. October was just a bad month for this team, but went into November, fresh start, beat Boise State 31-28, beat Utah Tech, and then Stanford to finish out the regular season. Took on SMU in the New Mexico Bowl, beat them 24-23, so a nice win to finish out the season. 8-5 was the final record, and you consider that month of October just a brutal month for this team, and honestly, they definitely could have beaten Liberty. They could have beaten East Carolina for sure. So, and I know Liberty was the ugliest one out of all of them, but that was definitely, I think, a winnable game there. It just didn't come out to be in the end. But overall, a good season for BYU. But how is this team going to be in 2023 with the talent? Let's look at the roster preview now. And Jaren Hall is gone. So a big standout quarterback who I definitely think is a very underrated player. He really was impressive in 2022. Last season put up nearly 3,200 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Really good touchdown interception ratio, and then a 66% completion rate. He also rushed for 350 yards last season and 4 touchdowns. So, he's a quarterback to keep an eye on. I definitely think in the NFL he could end up being that sleeper quarterback that turns out to be a really good ball player. And time will tell on that, but he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And for BYU, it is on to Kedon Slovis, who's coming in from Pitt. And Kedon Slovis, you remember back to 2019 when he was at USC. This is actually his third school, USC, then Pitt, then BYU. 2019, he was a standout quarterback, really impressive in 2019. And since then, he really hasn't reached that same level. He's kind of similar to like a Tanner Morgan from Minnesota in that way. Really big standout in 2019, but couldn't quite reach that same level. But I still think Kedon Slovis can reach that level again. And being at BYU, a team that's got a lot of talent, especially on offense around him, I think this is what Kedon Slovis needed. So really interested to see what he can do with BYU. But he could also have a story like a Michael Penix, for example. Really showed potential at the beginning of his career, kind of fell off there for a few years at Indiana, and then now Michael Penix transferred to Washington, and he is a Heisman contender for 2023. So we'll see what Kedon Slovis can do, and I do have optimism about him. The backfield does lose Christopher Brooks last season, right around 1,000 yards, just over 900 to be exact, with 6 touchdowns. Not a bad season for him, but obviously it's tough to live up to Tyler Algier, who is now a standout in the NFL. And then the receiving core, Puka Nacua, is gone. The lead in receiving last season, he had just over 100 yards. But your second and third wideouts in Keanu Hill and then Cody Epps both coming back. Your fifth wideout and Chase Roberts is coming back. Those are probably going to be your 3 main starters for the receivers there with Hill, Epps, and then Roberts. You do lose Braden Cosper, your 4th wideout, and then your top tight end. Actually, no, you return your top tight end and Isaac Rex as well. So I mean, that's definitely a good thing for Kedon Slovis. He's going to have a lot of experience around him talent-wise with the receiving core. The backfield has got a couple of the transfers coming in with Aiden Robbins and then Deion Smith. So, I mean, this is an offense that has got a lot of potential. You also lose a couple on the offensive line, but you're bringing in 3 transfers that could all be starters in 2023. The defense loses 2 on the D-line, 2 linebackers, and then 2 in the secondary. Also bringing a couple of transfers there. The transfer portal has been really good for this team, I would say, this offseason in general. So that's definitely a good sign for this team. And could this team potentially be a dark horse contender in the Big 12? I mean, out of the 4 teams joining the Big 12 this season, you got BYU, obviously, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston. I think BYU interests me the most out of those 4 teams. I think UCF is most likely out of any of those 4 teams to be a contender in 2023 in the Big 12, but I mean, it's going to be a challenge for the first year in the conference. I think for BYU, I do think it's going to be an adjustment as well. But I think in the future, especially with Oklahoma and Texas leaving after this season, BYU could very well step into that position of being a consistent contender in the conference. You got to consider, too, the way this team has played the past 3 years or so. They've really been excellent. And, I mean, you still got Kansas State in the conference. And, honestly, I mean, the way K-State looked last season, the way they're looking this season, that's a team that could really take over as the top team in the conference for years to come. But, I mean, otherwise, it's always just a big it's a conference that's always wide open. You never know who's going to be good, and there's seemingly 2 or 3 surprise teams. I'd say 2 surprise teams in the conference every year. I mean, TCU was absolutely surprising last season. No one expected them to be that good. Even Kansas State wasn't expected to be that good. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. The Big 12 is still wide open, and BYU could take over in the future. I don't think that's 2023, but I mean, keep an eye on BYU in the future. This is definitely an interesting team. Your transfer portal and recruiting, you got Kedon Slovis coming in from Pitt, obviously. The running backs, Aiden Robbins coming in from UNLV. Deion Smith from Colorado. Holker, tight end, is off to Colorado State. You're bringing a couple of receivers here. And Darius Lassiter coming in from Eastern Michigan. And then Keelan Marion coming in from UConn. Both these guys expected to be wide receiver 2s on the team this upcoming season. You do lose Clark Barrington off to Baylor. You do lose a few offensive linemen, but you're bringing in 3 guys that should all be starters in 2023, being Caleb Etienne coming in from Oklahoma State, Paul Mail coming in from Utah, and then Waylon Lapuaho coming in from Utah State. Isaiah Bagna, defensive lineman, is coming in from Boise State. You lose Keenan Pili off to Tennessee, along with Gabe Judy Lally, also to Tennessee defensive back, and George Udo. You bring in AJ Vong Pachan coming in from Utah State, and then Eddie Heckard coming in from Weber State. So a lot of good additions in the transfer portal for BYU recruiting-wise. 66th in the country, 12th in the Big 12. That is out of 14 teams in the conference. So you're definitely down there in recruiting, but the transfer portal has been generally good for this team, though, so that doesn't concern me too much. Got 2 4-stars coming in, 16 3-stars. And then for the future forecast meter, I got this team actually in an 8 out of 10 on the future forecast. I do think that, I mean, that might be higher than you might expect, but I do think that, once again, you got to consider the future of the Big 12 here. And, I mean, Texas, Oklahoma, 2 of the powerhouses are leaving. That leaves a wide open conference for anybody to take over. And, I mean, I think Oklahoma State's always going to be up there. Kansas State is a team that definitely has potential to always be up there. And BYU, I mean, this is a team, once again, you got to consider the past few seasons, how solid this team has been. I mean, it is right up there. This BYU team is definitely a team that, out of the 4 newcomers in the Big 12, I wouldn't be surprised if BYU became a major consistent contender in the conference for years to come. But with that, let's take a look at the schedule. And as we look forward to 2023, you got Sam Houston in week 1, Southern Utah in week 2. So 2 easy games there to start out this season. Then Arkansas on the road week 3. That was a tough matchup last season. And I mean, Arkansas could be a solid 8-win team, I think, in 2023. So that'll be a challenge. And then Kansas on the road. And this is one of those rare years where Kansas it actually could be a challenging game. They're going to be decent, I think, in 2023. And then Cincinnati at home, TCU on the road, Texas Tech at home, Texas on the road. Then you got West Virginia on the road, Iowa State, Oklahoma both at home, and then Oklahoma State on the road to finish out the regular season. So the Big 12 newcomers, you got to play Cincinnati along with, I think Cincinnati's actually it for the newcomers. You don't have to play Houston or UCF. But looking at September here, Sam Houston, Southern Utah, both easy wins. So you're going to have some good momentum heading into the Arkansas matchup as a 2-0 team. But Arkansas, once again, I see them being a pretty solid team. I do think KJ Jefferson, they'll be a tough one, and that's also a tough place to play. So I'm going to take Arkansas there in a close one. In Kansas, truly a 50-50 matchup here, your first Big 12 conference game. And I mean, Kansas, once again, this is going to be the one in 15 years where we actually have some expectations for Kansas. I mean, that's a team that looks really solid, actually, looking forward to 2023. I've got them predicted for 7 wins in 2023, and I mean, Kansas will be tough. I do think that they're a tricky team, and I think you lose that once you're 2-2 heading into your second month. Cincinnati got them on a Friday night. I do think you beat Cincinnati next season. I mean, this ain't the same Cincinnati. I do think that they're going to be very much in a rebuild phase. Luke Fickell off to Wisconsin, and that's a team that, I mean, has a pretty uncertain future, I do think, in the Big 12. So not too much confidence in them. I think you beat them, and then TCU on the road. I think you drop this one. I think TCU is still a challenging team in 2023, so you drop that one, but you come back and get a nice win over Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech could be a halfway decent team as well in 2023. So a couple of nice wins in your second month, but it's definitely a challenging month as well. You got to play Texas there on the 28th. I think you drop that one. Texas will be a tough team. They're probably my favorite to win the Big 12 this season. They're going to be a tough team to beat, that's for sure. So you're 4-4 heading into November. And November, honestly, all 4 games are winnable, but I do think you drop 2 of them and win 2 of them. You beat West Virginia and Iowa State. And both games I could see being convincing wins for BYU there. So I do think there's potential there. And then Oklahoma, they're going to be a tough team as well. You got Oklahoma at home. That's definitely going to be that's one of the more fun matchups of the conference slate, I think, in the Big 12 in general. That's definitely, I mean, Oklahoma being in BYU, one of the true blue bloods against BYU. Definitely an interesting matchup where I think it could go either way, but I'm going to favor the Sooners there barely, and then Oklahoma State on the road. Oklahoma State can be a tricky place to play. That's going to be a challenging team as well. I think he dropped that one. So that does end you at 6-6 on the regular season. But first season, new conference. I mean, the future is bright for BYU. I do think 2023 maybe record-wise doesn't quite live up to the past few years. But I do think with some of this young talent, I think the future is bright for this team. It's just 2023 might not be quite on the level that the past 3 years have been. But your range, I think the ceiling's pretty high for this team. I've got 9-3 for the ceiling, 4-8 for the floor. That's the best and the worst you could possibly be. I've got 6-6 for the prediction. But the ceiling is definitely higher than how low the floor is. I do think this is definitely a bold team in 2023. I mean, there's a chance they're 5-7, but I'm pretty confident in saying I do think this team at least gets 6 wins. But either way, it's definitely an interesting team. And Kedon Slovis, what an interesting fit as a quarterback for BYU. But going to be a fun team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on BYU, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.